Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you are viewing this. It is Mr. Serban, and we are going to talk today about factoring a little bit more. We're going to talk about it specifically with a greatest common factor. Now, a common factor is a number that can be pulled out of each individual number in the problem, and a greatest common factor is the biggest one of those. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to pull up Desmos. If my computer will work with me. There we are. So I'll pull up Desmos, and then we are going to type in our problem. Now there's two different methods to doing this, and we're going to work on Desmos first. So our instructions here. Say using Desmos, type it, meaning the problem in Desmos, and flip the sign. And what that means is like our factors in our parentheses. If it's positive 6, it becomes negative 6. And then type GCF and place the GCF in front of your factors. Now, we'll get to that step when we do. I'm going to go over 1 and 3 in Desmos. So I'll go over here, and I have 6x squared plus 12x minus 144. And I have my numbers, negative 6 and positive 4, meaning on number 1 over here, I have x plus 6 and x minus 4. Now my second step, I type GCF, and what I put in those parentheses is each number, the positive form. So instead of negative 144, positive 144, separated by commas. And what that looks like is over here. Number 2, I'm going to use the ABC keyboard down here and type GCF. Notice it goes from italics to standard font, so that means that I am using the correct one. Then I go back, type my parentheses, and then I type my numbers. So I have 6, comma, 12, comma, 144. And then I close my parentheses. And this number down here is my greatest common factor, and that's what comes out front over here. And that is my answer. Now, it is not always going to be the number that's out front. Sometimes it's not, but for the majority of these, it's going to be that number that's out front. If it's not the number out front, then you'll have to divide and do steps like we did the previous lesson, where you multiply the first and the last, and then figure out what adds up to the middle. Now, example 3. Doing the same exact method. I'll clear out what I have over here, and I'll scroll up. So I have 2x squared plus 24x plus 70. I'll go over here and type it in. 2x squared plus 24x plus 70. And I see over here I've got negative 5 and negative 7, which means that it's x plus 5 and x plus 7. I'll go over here, use the ABC keyboard, type GCF. If it's on your phone, that's what it will look like. Parentheses, 2, 24, and 70. And my greatest common factor is right here. It is 2, so I put that out front, and that is my answer. So what that greatest common factor actually means, we're about to go over. But this is how you do it if you want to do it in Desmos. This is up to you, but this is how you complete it in Desmos. Now, say we don't have Desmos. Say we're not doing it like that. We're going to do it by hand. I'll bring over this. Non-Desmos. Divide everything by the GCF, which means you have to first find the GCF, and then make a list of numbers and figure out the factors like we did originally in X puzzles. So, example 2, 2 and 4 go with non-Desmos. I look and I think, what divides into 4, 24, and 32? And for greatest common factor, I'm looking for the biggest one, because 2 divides into all those, but so does 4. Now keep in mind the greatest common factor has to actually divide into all of them. It can't just divide partially into one. You can't have a fraction. So I'm going to pick 4. So because 1 divides 2 and 4. So my GCF is 4. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to divide everything by 4. And I cross it out, so I get n squared. 24 divided by 4 is 6n. 32 divided by 4 is 8. We'll bring this back later, my GCF, but first we got to solve this. So my X puzzle, 8's on the top, 6 is on the bottom, and then I'm looking through, okay, what multiplies to 8 and adds to 6, because it's positive on top, so I'm adding to the bottom. So I've got 1 and 8, well that doesn't add to 6, and I've got 2 and 4. That adds to 6. That multiplies to 8. So 2 and 4 are my side numbers. And then I can always double check. 2 times 4, well, 2 times 4, that's positive 8. 2 plus 4, positive 6. I have solved it. Going off to the side here, I write x. I usually use x. N was in this problem, but I have x plus 2, x plus 4. Do remember, you only switch the signs if you're using Desmos. If you're using this method, don't switch the signs. And then this greatest common factor comes out front like it did over here in examples 1 and 3. So my greatest common factor is 4. So it's 4 and then x plus 2, x plus 4. I can multiply that to double check. So I have x and then plus 4, x plus 2. X times x gives me x squared. 4 times x gives me 4x. 2 times x gives me 2x. And then 2 times 4 gives me 8. So I now have x squared. Add my diagonal plus 6x plus 8. On the outside of that is still a 4. And we're going back to distributive property. So I distribute the 4 in, and I get 4x squared plus 24x plus 32. And if you notice, this one matches up with my original problem back here. Also, this does because essentially I was multiplying back in, and earlier, back up here, I divided out 4. So I know that this is my correct answer because I got the same thing back when I did the opposite operations. If that confused you, that's okay. We're going to do another one. Remember, you always have the option to use Desmos. It's entirely up to you. So let's go over another one. Example 4. We're going to go on the non-Desmos method. So I have 5x squared plus 15x minus 270. So I look at my numbers, 5, 15, 270. Well, I gotta look and think, well, the only numbers that divide into 5 are 1 and 5. And we're talking about greatest common factor here, so I'm going to be using 5. I divide 5 into all those. Make sure it comes out even. Just preemptively up here, my greatest common factor. 5 divided by 5 is just x squared. 15 divided by 5 is positive 3x. And then negative 270 divided by 5 is negative 54. And now I have to double check. So my greatest common factor is right, because I can't divide anything else out besides 1. Now I set up my x puzzle. If we remember, the last part goes on top, so negative 54. Middle part goes on bottom, and I have 3. I need 2 side numbers that multiply to negative 54 and then combine to 3. The reason I say combine is I'm trying to figure out is one positive, one negative, both positive or both negative. Since it's negative on top, I have one positive and one negative because that's the only combination of those 3 that gives me a negative when I multiply. So I start listing out numbers that multiply to 54. 1 and 54. Well, that doesn't combine even close to 3. 2 and 27. Still not there. 3 and 16. Nope. Hold on. 3 and 18. That's still not there. That's still at 15, so we gotta keep going. I can check 4, but 4 gives me a decimal, and I can't use decimals. 5 gives me a decimal because it doesn't end in a 0 or a 5. And so I go to 6. And then I go 6 and 9. Well, when I combine those, if I make 9 negative, I get negative 3. This means I'm close. I have at least a 3, so I'm going to put 6 and 9. And then I look. The sign of the bottom number is positive, meaning the sign of the bigger answer is positive. So 9 is positive, 6 is negative. I look back, there's no leading coefficient, so I don't have to do any of the slide, divide, bottoms up part, like a couple days ago. So now I just write these in. So I have x minus 6, x plus 9. A lot of people forget about this last step. I'd look at their answer and be like, what's missing? Because they've got this part, they've got the x minus 6, they've got the x plus 9. It's my greatest common factor. I divided that out, so I need to make sure it gets multiplied back in, meaning that it goes in my final answer. This is how you factor when there's a greatest common factor. Now, we may go over a few special cases in the future where your greatest common factor doesn't take all of it out, but for now, we'll focus on that. So, your work for the day. It says AFTA, but it's algebra. I adapted it. So, the first one, there's no greatest common factor. You just factor that simply. And then the rest of them, you factor like you normally would. Well, it was there. So, you can cross one out, and you can use either method. So remember, Desmos, type it in, and then type in the second line. Or non-Desmos, find that greatest common factor, make the list, and solve your X puzzle. If you have questions, feel free to email me and contact me. I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. And I will look through all your work to make sure that it's getting done correctly. I hope you have a great day, and I hope we will see you again another time. And stay safe and stay healthy. See you later.